Okay. And as I said earlier, our first speaker is Leona Morgan. She's going to talk more about her fight against nuclear and her organization that she's also working with, Navajo. Leona Morgan.
Good morning. Yat e binem. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being here. Maybe I'll stand up. It's easier to see everybody. She'e todich evening nishle tana bithni bashish chin kia ani dashe che tohoglini dashanele. Good morning to my relatives and everyone here, colleagues, friends, new friends, and people that are just interested in what we have to say. I'm here from New Mexico. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am Diné, and so I introduced myself by my clans. And so in my culture, I have two of the original clans of leadership as well as water clans. And so to our people, I usually don't talk about this a lot, but I think this is not really how I start my talks, but we as Indigenous people, and I just want to recognize some of my relatives over here, Mr. Tommy Rock and Teresa Montoya, because they also do the work, and we have some other folks here as well from affected communities such as Church Rock and Sanders and other places. So we have a lot of Diné people in the UN this year at this event. And so I want to also just recognize our people. We have a lot of events coming up this year, and I want to invite you to the Navajo Nation to come and see some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. But the way I wanted to start my talk is just to explain, again, I don't really explain these things and talk about this that much, but we're in a really serious time right now. As Indigenous peoples, we are experiencing tremendous changes in our environment that is changing how we use and practice our cultures and our traditions. So the things that our medicine people relied on, the movement of the earth, the way we're situated within the universe, and you know, even things like the height of the snow and all of these things are changing. And we as Indigenous people, especially Diné people, we can only tell certain stories when there's snow on the ground. And so it was really weird because, you know, I want to play my string games, which is a cultural thing we can only do in the wintertime. But it's really interesting when there's no snow on the ground. Are we allowed to do these things at this time? And so the climate change is severely impacting every aspect of our culture. So I just want to start with that. As people who still live where our ancestors lived, we are fortunate as Diné people to be indigenous to our traditional homelands. A lot of other Indigenous people were either genocided or removed is the nice word they use, but there is still relocation happening today because of the nuclear industry and other things. Of course, this administration, you know, wants to, relocation is the minimum impact. They want to take away all of our rights. They want to just demolish our sovereignty as a nation. And so with all of that combined, you know, we're in a very dire time right now because of the impacts that we're feeling in our traditional ways, combined with the push from this administration for resource extraction and all the things they're doing. But on top of that, the nuclear industry and the very strong push for weapons and the lie that nuclear energy is clean or renewable. So we really need to, I want to make sure everyone walks away knowing that nuclear energy is an inherent part of nuclear weapons, and that nuclear weapons is a byproduct of nuclear energy. So they are together, and as people fighting uranium, we are always fighting both. We never separate. There's no such thing as peaceful use of nuclear. because we cannot coexist. Nuclear and humanity cannot coexist. So I just kind of wanted to ground us in all of these realities that we're facing right now as Indigenous people. So let me just back up. The work that I do, I started doing work to stop an in situ leach uranium mine on our land, our homeland, which is the Navajo Nation. But within the Navajo Nation, there's all these loopholes because there's all this private land that was either bought a long time ago or the churches came in, and then through the General Allotment Act or the Dawes Act, we have also what's known as the checkerboard area. So even though you see this landmass that's called the Navajo Nation, there's tons of jurisdictional loopholes. And especially in what we call Eastern Agency, there's also a split estate. So it might be a different government agency dealing with the surface rights, and then you're fighting a different agency for the mineral and water rights. So it's extremely complicated for us to just say, oh, we're going to fight uranium, because we're fighting EPA, NRC, DOE, IAEA, all of these entities, but we're also fighting our own Navajo Nation. And so our own Navajo Nation is a colonial structure. And I'm going to tell you a story. So this is my presentation about the work that I'm doing. So Navajo Nation is a quasi-sovereign entity. We're not 100% sovereign. We're not our own country. We use a lot of United States resources. We get funding from the United States. And our leadership is mostly men who are almost beholden to this colonial structure. And traditionally, that's not how we operate. Traditionally, we are a matrilineal society. Traditionally, the women are the ones doing a lot of the work. And now today, that's coming back in the grassroots movements. So when you go out to Navajo and there's people coming together working on environmental issues, it's the women taking the lead, fighting the hydrogen development, the helium, working on water rights, dealing with the coal mining and all of the power plants closing down, where they want to place SMRs, and then of course the uranium work. So right now, they call it a rematriation. Some people use this word, but it's just our traditional ways. So back home, what we're dealing with is over 500 abandoned uranium mines on our land. There's over 20,000 in the whole country. And so I'm just curious, how many of you know what an abandoned uranium mine is?
No, wait a minute.
What is an abandoned uranium mine? Do you know what is an abandoned uranium mine? Okay, so maybe I should ask how many people don't know. I'm not trying to point anyone out or call anyone out, but there's a really basic level of understanding when it comes to fighting nuclear that I hope everyone can start with, is that nuclear comes from uranium. And uranium is coming out of our land. So we're going to hear more from Isaiah about uranium coming from his community's land. And so the impacts from that first extraction, ripping that mineral from our Mother Earth, this is where I hope all of you can start to reimagine your place in this fight. Because your place in this fight, it includes uranium mining. So your place in this fight will impact what happens on our lands, the contamination that happens to our water, the deaths that are a result of all of the illnesses caused by the nuclear monster. And so we are all in this together, and it starts with uranium. Our people, we have a law against uranium mining that the Navajo Nation established in 2005. We have a law against uranium transport that was passed in 2012. But what does that mean if our government is a puppet entity of the United States? How strong are those laws if laws can just be changed at any time? But in the sense of the United States as a supreme law of the land, or however, the supreme entity of almost the world, they don't care about our sovereignty. They don't care that we have these laws to protect our people and our sacred places. And so what we're experiencing now is a push for a lot of new uranium mining, new development on our lands. And so just to back up, so let's start with the Manhattan Project and all of the mining that occurred. So before there were nuclear power plants, all of the mining was used for defense. So the United States is responsible for all of that mining. And all of the 20,000 abandoned uranium mines in the country, the United States just has no budget to clean them up. So that's why they're abandoned. So there's no cleanup happening in the country on all of these 20,000 mines, except where people are fighting for cleanup. So the Navajo Nation, through the Waxman hearings in 2007, it was a representative from the state of California who helped to get a hearing in Congress that led to the cleanup of abandoned uranium mines, which is being pushed in a very, like, the cleanup is not being handled in a community-oriented way. The cleanup is, some of the cleanup are really bad proposals being pushed by the US EPA on our people right now. Literally pushing our people to build a uranium dump. They're saying it's off the reservation, but it's just outside of that imaginary line. So now one of the realities is to clean up one community, they're saying to build a dump in another community. So it's pitting communities against each other. And so while we're all fighting each other, nobody's really attacking the responsible party, which is the United States. So cleanup across the Navajo Nation has been cap and cover, bury it in place. And we don't want 500 permanent nuclear waste dumps on our reservation. So this is the status quo right now, that there's no groundwater restoration. Everywhere there was a mine, there's the contamination that they're just burying and placing, they're just trying to contain it permanently. They're not cleaning it up. And then wherever there was a mill, there's underground plumes of contamination. Again, that's not being cleaned up. But the most egregious part is a lot of this information is not known by the community. So of course the community is still using water and resources in these places. And the education is it's just not happening. And the healthcare, and of course RECA is not there anymore. So this is where we're at with uranium mining. There's a lot of waste, it's not being cleaned up, people are still getting sick. Now fast forward May 2023, or last year, May 2024, the United States stopped purchasing uranium from Russia. Okay, I'm going out of order. November 2023, Biden is in Dubai talking about tripling nuclear energy development in the name of climate change. Now there's over 30 countries that think nuclear energy is going to save us from the climate disaster, and so they're all pushing for more uranium mining for nuclear energy. And then in May last year, the United States stopped purchasing uranium from Russia. So where are they going to get that uranium? Right now, I am extremely concerned and pretty terrified if this administration would use something like eminent domain or national security or critical minerals or Project 2025 or whatever they're going to use to get to our uranium, even though we have a law against it, even though we've already shown the dangers and the impacts, and our people have spoken out time and time again. This administration doesn't care. So how do we stop that push for new nuclear? How do we stop that push for new uranium? We have to stop the weapons. We have to stop the nuclear energy development. SMRs, HALEU, whatever technology, so-called new technology. We all know it's just the most expensive, most dangerous, complicated way to boil water. And we don't need that. So what we need to do is really examine our consumption of energy and weapons and start with figuring out how do we accomplish all of these goals together and do our own part. How do we all do our piece of the pie, work on our little piece of the puzzle, and collectively stop the proliferation of both nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. I didn't even talk about the issue I'm working on. My time is up. But yeah, we're dealing with a transport fight. So right now, just to summarize, there's a uranium mine at the Grand Canyon. It started mining last year. They're driving the uranium to the one mill in the country. The one mill in the country is called White Mesa Mill in Utah, and it's being supported by the DOE to develop rare earth elements. So the one mill in the country has a license for two things: to process uranium ore or to process alternate feed. Alternate feed is any kind of radioactive waste that basically they're using it as a dump. So the mill was being used to process any kind of waste from Estonia, Japan. Now they're expecting a shipment from Australia just to find a place to store the waste. So it was being used as a waste dump. But now the DOE is pumping millions into White Mesa to develop REE. And our Navajo Nation is saying, well, the government is going to put so much into it, we can't really fight it. So now our tribe is in business with the uranium company we're fighting called Energy Fuels. And they basically got rid of the transportation law to say no transport to regulating transport. So these are the changes happening now, and they're saying that it's actually helping our sovereignty, but I wonder how much it's diminishing our sovereignty. So our Navajo Nation, again, like I said, we're fighting all these things, but internally we are also fighting our own government to stand up to the federal government. So this is our fight, and thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all of you being here.